A quorum being present, the Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Development will come to order. Good morning and welcome to today's subcommittee hearing. I would like to thank our panel of witnesses and our members for joining today's discussion on private sector solutions to close the skills gap. Since the Great Recession 10 years ago, the American workforce has seen a growing shortage of skilled workers. With the current deficit rising to over 6 million workers, businesses and industries are struggling to hire qualified candidates for existing job openings, a phenomenon known as the skills gap. In 2015, a survey of over 40,000 employers worldwide, participants reported that the top 3 reasons they have difficulty filling open jobs are lack of available applicants, lack of technical competency, and lack of experience. The shortage of skilled employees can be seen in our own job market data. On the face of the Department of Labor's April jobs report, the outlook appears rosy. Unemployment is all the way down to 3.9%, and the economy is adding hundreds of thousands of new jobs each month. But when you dig a little deeper, the numbers reveal the labor force participation rate remains low, with only 63% of working-age Americans participating in the workforce. In other words, there are plenty of in-demand jobs available, but individuals with skills and qualifications needed to fill them are scarce. Faced with these challenges, private sector businesses and industries have been taking matters into their own hands and are devising creative approaches to bridge the skills gap. Many companies are establishing partnerships with schools to develop programs that strengthen employees' proficiencies and align their skills with industry needs. In a 2014 survey of U.S. executives involved in workforce development, 77% of executives reported their businesses were affiliated with a 4-year college or university. 32% were partnered with a community college, and 31% a technical or workforce development program. Some businesses have put an emphasis on approaches that combine on-the-job learning and classroom-based instruction like apprenticeships, while others are relying more heavily on industry-recognized certifications and credentialing to build their workforce and hire candidates with applicable skills. These are just a handful of initiatives that private sector companies are taking to equip workers with the skills they need to succeed in high-skill, high-wage, and high-demand fields. The skills gap phenomenon is an issue that this committee has paid close attention to over the past several years, and members have taken steps based on our analysis to advance policies that complement workforce development initiatives already taking place in the private sector. Last year, the committee favorably reported the House of Representatives unanimously passed H.R. 2353, the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act. This bipartisan bill to improve career and technical education would help to equip students with the skills they need for in-demand jobs while providing working Americans with a path to success. In December 2017, this committee also favorably reported H.R. 5408, the PROSPER Act, higher education reform legislation. The PROSPER Act would expand student access to and participation in industry-led earn and learn programs and apprenticeships, and it would bolster partnerships between businesses and institutions of higher education. These legislative initiatives are a good start and will be instrumental in closing the skills gap, but members of this committee can greatly benefit from hearing more about the solutions emanating out of the private sector to strengthen our national workforce and fill good-paying jobs. I am looking forward to hearing from our panel of witnesses and from members of the subcommittee today as we explore industry-led solutions to close the skills gap. And I'm going to say I know a couple of us have other committee hearings going on at the same time, so we're extremely interested in this testimony. If you see some of us come in and out, it is only because of scheduling and not because of certainly interest. I think the House Armed Services Committee's meeting and Energy and Commerce's meeting as well this morning. So I just want to note that, and I look forward to hearing y'all's testimony this morning. But I will now yield to the subcommittee ranking member, Susan Davis, for her opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. And as the chair said, I too will be in and out of the room. It's always hard to accommodate these schedules, but we very much value your being here today. Organizations in my district, like the San Diego Workforce Partnership and the East County Economic Development Council, have long spoken to me about the growing need for skilled workers, Numerous studies confirm their experiences. Researchers estimate that at our nation's current rates of training and educating students, the U.S. will face a shortage of 5 million workers by 2020, including an estimated 2 million manufacturing jobs, statistics I know you're aware of. Despite industry leaders being among the most vocal on this issue, the private sector investment in workforce development has actually declined over time. A recent report found that employers paid to train about 20% of their workers in 1996, but that number had dropped to 11% by 2008, as this chart demonstrates. In fact, between 2003 and 2013, the number of employers sponsored on-the-job training positions, the most effective model, fell by 40%, and only 22% of companies said they would consider hiring an employee who required additional training when they were having trouble filling a position. This unfortunate trend follows the cuts in federal investments for workforce development initiatives. Between 2001 and 2016, WIA and WIOA formula grants were cut by 40%. Perkins CTE was cut by 30%, and adult education programs were cut by 20%. We must all step up to the plate. I look forward to hearing how companies can be encouraged to invest in their workers. Tackling the shortage of skilled workers will take the cooperation, we know, of cooperation of businesses, of schools, and the workforce development system to expand evidence-based programs. Then there are many good examples around the country, including in San Diego, of ways that employers can invest in a more prepared workforce. Registered apprenticeships, for example, bring together industry experts and educators to provide students with a hands-on learning experience. Students are often able to earn money, receive stackable credentials, and establish a valuable mentoring relation with experts in their chosen fields. I'm looking forward to hearing from the witnesses what they believe the federal role should be in ensuring quality and prestige. Prestige is important in this area as well, for workforce development programs, and where we should be investing resources in order to expand effective initiatives. I was proud to be among hundreds of members who supported WIOA when it passed the House, because it sought to help workers benefit our businesses, revitalize our economy, and strengthen the middle class. WIOA is also responsive to individuals' various barriers to employment and allows for critical support services for participants. I was also pleased to be able to work in a bipartisan manner to pass the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act. Federal investment in high-quality career and technical education that is accessible to all students, regardless of background, will help address the need for a highly skilled workforce. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the need for greater engagement with institutions producing a large percentage of minority talent. Employer outreach to students before they graduate can help address the skills gap, which in many minority communities is particularly acute. In certain occupations, including the tech sector, women and people of color are woefully underrepresented, and the skills gap can be more of an outreach gap. So I'll continue to work with my colleagues to ensure that we are investing in students and workers throughout their professional careers. I look forward to hearing about the good work that our employer witnesses have done in this space, and I look forward to hearing about what more can be done, as my colleague has said, to encourage employers to work with the community colleges, the workforce development system, and CTE programs to build a workforce that meets the demands of our global economy. Once again, thank you for being here. And
thank you, Ms. Davis, for those great comments. They were wonderful comments. Pursuant to Committee Rules 7C, all members will be permitted to submit written statements to be included in the permanent hearing record, and without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other extraneous material referenced during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. I will now introduce our witnesses for this morning's hearings. Mr. Stephen Partridge is Vice President of Workforce and Economic Development at Northern Virginia Community College. Ms. Tamara Jacoby is President and CEO of Opportunity America. Ms. Tracy Tapani is co-president and owner of Wyoming Machine Incorporated in Stacy, Minnesota. Mr. Ryan Costella is Director of Strategic Partnerships for Click Bond, headquartered in Carson City, Nevada. You know we have a Ryan Costello, right? I'll now ask our witnesses to raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Let the record reflect the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Before I recognize you to provide your testimony, let me briefly explain our lighting system. You each have 5 minutes to present your testimony. When you begin, the light in front of you will turn green. When 1 minute is left, the light will turn yellow. When your time has expired, the light will turn red. At that point, I will ask you to wrap up your remarks as best as you are able. Members will each have 5 minutes to ask questions. Mr. Partridge, I recognize you for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member Davis, members of the subcommittee, thank you and good morning. This topic is very important to me personally and to our nation. My name is Steve Partridge. I work for Northern Virginia Community College, or NOVA, as we're referred to locally. We are the largest public educational institution in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're the second largest community college in the United States with over 75,000 students. The greater Washington region, like much of the nation, is facing a skills shortage, specifically in the field of IT and cybersecurity. If left unaddressed, we risk losing jobs not only to other markets, but other nations as companies look for creative ways to outsource that work. Before I highlight steps taken to work with partners locally, I'd like to talk about what's really driving the root cause behind the skills gap. In Northern Virginia and the surrounding region, demand for skilled IT cyber workers continues to outpace supply. In fact, this year alone, the region will need approximately 20,000 new workers just to keep up with current demand. That doesn't include an Amazon headquarters. Progress has been made. The latest data shows that the greater Washington region awarded nearly 11,000 degrees last year in IT. So we're really making a lot of progress because that's double what it was 5 years ago, but it can't keep up with the demand. It is far outstripping what we're able to produce locally, which leaves businesses in somewhat of a conundrum. They have to either steal from competitors or import labor from other markets. This tells us that our career awareness system, the interest gap, isn't working. How we educate parents, students, teachers on really what the in-demand skills are and the job opportunities isn't keeping up. In fact, I'd say we don't even really have a system. Most of the time, it's a very haphazard approach to career awareness, and this is something that we're taking very seriously in Northern Virginia. For many career switchers or students, the path to a high-demand career isn't very clearly understood. A program to address this in Northern Virginia is taking shape. We're calling it the Tech Talent Pipeline. This ambitious effort unites our public school systems, post-secondary institutions, nonprofit, and public workforce systems, along with economic developers and businesses, to look at how we create a true system, how do we build a pipeline that generates interest, and how do we measure that interest along the way rather than waiting 10 years to see if it worked. At the heart of this entire effort is employer-centered design. A major factor contributing to this skills shortage is many of the graduates, even today, come out somewhat not ready to go into the workforce according to employers. They lack many of the soft skills, they lack the real-world experience that many of us maybe had and got in our first job or two. What we're finding is many high school graduates never actually enter the workforce until after they graduate. The summer job is not something that many kids do as much anymore. In fact, a generation ago, 2/3 of high school graduates actually had work experience in the summers. Less than 1/3 do now. So to address this problem, we have been piloting some programs with different companies. Lockheed Martin recently announced a new software development associate program designed to attract, develop, and retain mid-career professionals. It's a 3-year format that the students apply for after their freshman year, and it allows them to begin the security clearance process, which is very important here in Northern Virginia, and they get their tuition paid for going forward that would lead to a bachelor's degree. I'm proud to report that Northern Virginia is one of the first community colleges to be part of this program, and it is great for our students to be able to get that real-world experience and get subsidies while they go to school. The other partner is Amazon. We are actually their East Coast provider of their apprenticeship program. And when you think of Amazon, you often don't think IT, but Amazon Web Services is located in Herndon, Virginia. And as that headquarters needs, as they grow to expand and take in more data, they cannot keep up with demand for IT workers. So they have started a federally registered apprenticeship program. And we are now cranking out over 70 students are in the pipeline. I'm happy to report that it's a credential-based system, it's stackable, and nearly 100% of the students pass the exams after 12 to 16 weeks in our classroom. So it's been very successful, and so successful that Amazon's continued to scale that program, and they've realized the economies of scale, and they're attracting other employers to be part of this effort as well. So we're very thankful to have two great partners. One of the big things we need to make sure we focus on is data through this effort. The tech talent pipeline will only work if we have good data. And having demand data is important. There's lots of sources for that, what businesses need, talking with businesses. But what we lack is a lot of times the student data. Where are the students in the pipeline? What are their interests? What are their skills? What classes are they taking? Have they done internships? We have all these resources, but they're not pinpointed often at the right students. If you think of a pipeline now, many of the students are pushing their way through it. We want to build a system that we pull students through it and give them different milestones along the way and provide efforts to help us make sure they graduate better ready to enter the workforce and more prepared to go to work. Thank you, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jacoby, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member Davis, members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity. I'm Tamar Jacoby. I'm president of Opportunity America. We're a small think tank that focuses on economic mobility, and we also spearhead a coalition of employers stepping up to provide career education. And I'm here to paint a picture of what employers are doing. You know, it's often argued that companies don't do enough workforce development, and the critics aren't wrong. Business needs to do more, but a growing number of employers are waking up to the need. Programs are proliferating. They come in all shapes and sizes, and I'm going to use my time to talk about 3 examples. I'll start with the biggest, Wal-Mart Academies. So in February 2015, Walmart made news by announcing that it was raising wages across the company. But arguably the bigger news that day was that the nation's largest private employer was going to offer on-the-job education to employees. 3 years later, the culture of workforce development is deeply entrenched at Walmart. One program with a big payoff is for Frontline Supervisors. Those are the hourly workers who manage the grocery and apparel and other departments. Courses are taught at regional centers called academies. There are close to 200 academies nationwide, usually classes in the back of a store. Managers learn all day, every day, for 2 weeks on company time. A lot of thought goes into the curriculum, but the delivery is casual, conversational, rather than lectures. And workers combine time in class with time on the shop floor, practicing what they've learned in a real-world setting. The program has a significant effect on employee retention, a 10% increase for the employees who actually go through the program, but also a 10% increase for the people they supervise, because it works. Walmart also reports increased worker engagement and customer satisfaction. And what makes the program work, and it's one of my themes today, is the way it combines classroom learning with hands-on practice in a real-world environment. It's the key ingredient of apprenticeship. But, applied in this case to a shorter, less structured, less technical program. Example number 2, Toyota T10. Toyota maintains 2 gold standard workforce programs, the Toyota Advanced Manufacturing Technician Program and the Toyota Technician Training and Education Network, which teaches automotive diagnostics and repair. The concept at the heart of both is collaboration with a college, usually a community college. And that sounds simple, but it can be surprisingly difficult in practice. Thousands of companies across the U.S. partner with community colleges, but the quality of these partnerships is very uneven, from meaningful to check the box. The challenge Toyota faced was how to build a national network of meaningful relationships. T10 links 36 colleges to nearby Toyota and Lexus dealers. Toyota supplies late model cars, diagnostic tools, but the most important thing it provides are standards. Instructors have to be Toyota certified. There are protocols and procedures for the colleges and the dealerships. It takes 2 years for a college even to get into the program, constant review. Texas State Technical College maintains a fairly typical program, 2 years. Students spend two semesters in the college, then a semester on the job at a dealership, then they repeat the cycle. They graduate with college certificates, but also industry certifications. Between 90 and 95% land a job at the dealership where they interned. Starting salary $30K a year, and it can rise to $85K with experience and a little more training. The last example is another partnership between a company and a community college, but with a twist. It's an employer working with the non-degree division of a college. So many of those who enroll are older students. Most don't aim to earn degrees. I call it unbundled community college. Students learn the skills they need for a job unbundled from what they need for a college credential. Spirit Aerosystems makes cutting-edge airplane parts, and when it opened a plant in North Carolina in 2010, it formed a partnership with the non-credit division of Lenoir Community College. Why the non-credit division? It's not answerable to an accreditor or a faculty committee, so it's flexible, more flexible and nimbler, better positioned to respond to an employer's changing labor needs. Lenoir also found that many students prefer an unbundled approach. This is a growing trend nationwide. Students who return to community college for just 1 or 2 courses likely to help them move up on the job, then leave without a credential in a hurry to get back to work. Today, more than half the workers in the Spirit plant have come through Lenoir, and this year the college launched a new program, a spin-off of the Spirit partnership, a 13-week manufacturing academy supported by several companies in the region. The new academy is also a non-degree program, but students earn industry certifications, and Lenoir has agreed to count those certifications toward college credit, bridging the gap between the degree and non-degree programs and combining the best of both worlds. No one knows how much unbundled community college exists across America, but many institutions report the trend is growing. I'm out of time. This raises many questions for policymakers, this experimentation. Should government be helping to jumpstart programs? Should federal financial aid be available for a wider variety of educational programs? Should policy do more to accommodate unbundled community college? Questions beyond my scope. The good news I bring today, many employers are stepping up.
Thank you, Ms. Jacoby. At this point, I'd like to recognize Ms. Tapani for 5 minutes of opening comments.
Thank you, Chairman Guthrie, Ranking Davis. Sorry, and the distinguished members of the subcommittee. I appreciate being invited here today to speak with you about closing the skills gap, which is a very important issue to many employers throughout the United States. My name is Tracy Tapani, and for the past 24 years, I've served as co-president and owner of Wyoming Machine, a small family-owned precision sheet metal fabrication company located in Minnesota. In addition to my years as an owner of this small manufacturing company, I also serve as vice chair of Minnesota's Governor's Workforce Development Board, and I'm a board member of the Minnesota State Chamber of Commerce. I come from Minnesota, a place where there are many people who come from a Scandinavian heritage. They're hardworking, resourceful, and self-sufficient people. Finnish people often use the word sisu to describe their determination to overcome adversity. And I'm hoping in the testimony I share with you today, you're going to see how I've used that Finnish sisu to work towards solving the skills gap. Unfortunately, all the effort that I've put forth over the last few years has not been enough, and the skills gap continues to persist. In the next few minutes, I'm going to mention a lot about skills and training. In the past, people learned skills through a variety of activities, including work on family farms, military service, high school education, and on-the-job training in a robust manufacturing economy. But times have changed, and people don't acquire skills in the same way as they did in the past. Today, more workers need a combination of education and training. Education to acquire knowledge, and training to learn hands-on skills that lead to job success. Middle-skilled jobs account for 53% of the United States labor market, but only 43% of the country's workers are trained to middle skills. Over the past 2 decades, we've implemented training programs to help develop our current and future workforce and address the mismatch. In my company, we work closely with schools in the K-12 system. We often provide transportation financing so that they can visit our facility to take tours and interact with manufacturing workers. We also provide summer internship opportunities for teachers so that they can take that hands-on learning and bring it back to the classroom to assist their students. In addition to working with K-12, we work closely with our community and technical college partners. We actually host virtual classes through Pine Technical and Community College located in my region, and we provide those classes to current workers who want to upskill while they're on the job. For example, we've experimented with hiring people from low-paying jobs in industries, and we use our IT system as well as on-the-job training to provide skills to these people. In one case, we hired someone who'd been working at a well-known fast food chain. Her experience in the fast food industry allowed her to develop strong skills for following processes, which is critical for a manufacturing environment. When she was hired, we built on these skills with ITV classes and on-the-job training. And over the last few years, this employee has earned a production technologies credential. Her wages have increased by 53%, and she's had access to benefits like paid time off and employer-sponsored health insurance. As an added benefit to the employee, she's earned college credits, and she has a portable credential that's recognized in our industry. Next, we use in-house training to develop skills in areas where we see critical skill shortages. Welding is one such area. Welding is an essential skill in manufacturing, and welders need to understand basic metallurgy, how different metals, welding gases, gas pressure, and other factors come together to produce welds that meet technical specification. Welders need access to training from qualified instructors with the right curriculum. Without this curriculum, a welder may be able to produce welds that look beautiful on the surface, but they don't meet the importance requirements needed by industries like construction, defense, and aerospace. I'm investing in my workforce, but I can't do it without the federal government's support through investments in our workforce and education systems. I'm thankful that in 2018, Congress appropriated slight increase for programs under the Bipartisan Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act and Perkins Career and Technical Education, and increased funding for apprenticeship. This is a great step, but Congress must continue to invest in federal programs that support a broad pipeline of workers. Policymakers should make short-term, career-oriented, post-secondary programs with a track record of success eligible for Pell Grants. The quality of short-term programs is essential. No one, especially employers, wants programs that don't meet industry needs. In my area, the need is great, and my local college reports that approximately 65% of students are eligible for Pell Grants. I've seen firsthand how important financial support is to many students taking courses, and many students couldn't be successful in training programs without wraparound services and supports. Across Minnesota, we're working to remove barriers that are keeping people from accessing training and moving into higher-paying, in-demand jobs. And at this point, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stepney. I'd like to now recognize Mr. Costello for 5 minutes of opening comments.
Good morning, Chairwoman Fox, Chairman Guthrie, Ranking Member Davis, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Ryan Costello, Director of Strategic Initiatives at ClickBond Incorporated, a family-owned manufacturer headquartered in Carson City, Nevada. Today's manufacturing industry is modern, high-tech, and growing, and offers many promising career options. Manufacturing added 24,000 workers nationwide in April, and unemployment is at a record 17-year low. Tax reform provided a much-needed boost to the economy, and manufacturers appreciate the dramatically improved business climate to invest even more in our people and grow our businesses. The economy in Nevada was at rock bottom 10 years ago, and we've made some important adjustments since then, including growing our manufacturing footprint and how we prepare workers for modern manufacturing careers. Despite the significant economic turnaround, there are still difficulties finding enough workers to fill these jobs, which is a real problem for our industry. Approximately 426,000 U.S. manufacturing jobs are going unfilled today because there are simply not enough qualified applicants to fill them. Over a 10-year period, that number is going to rise to 2 million if we don't do something now. At ClickBond, we really dug into our workforce challenge during the Great Recession because there were a lot of Nevadans out of work, and we had good, well-paying jobs available. Yet, there was a significant mismatch between what we were looking for and what skills people possessed coming in the door. Unfortunately, many of these folks were unemployable even at the entry level because they lacked the foundational skills to read, do basic math, and problem solve. Moreover, many job seekers had limited to no technical education or experience. We had little time to fix this emerging crisis, and our skilled worker shortage remains a challenge today. One baby boomer retires from the workforce every 9 seconds, leaving limited time for development of the next generation of technical experts. ClickBond knew it had the strength to be a catalyst in Nevada to generate solutions cooperatively and locally with a coalition of educators, policymakers, and employers. In the immediate aftermath of the Great Recession, we designed and executed a fast-track program that took people from food stamps to full-time employment with benefits in just 16 weeks. ClickBond was proud to hire several graduates from the program. Today, that program is being scaled to accommodate the huge demand for manufacturing technicians in northern Nevada. These programs, along with a new generation of modern apprenticeship programs, is helping build the talent to meet our future needs. We did not stop there and continued onward. Three major drivers focused our efforts for nearly a decade at ClickBond. First, we prioritized engaging with external stakeholders on making and delivering a better education policy. We participate on the Governor's Workforce Development Board, and we've developed partnerships with K-12 educators and higher education leaders to define the right curricula, certifications, and infrastructure to sustain a program of talent development that aligns with the economic development trends of our region. Second, our strategy increases youth engagement to help build the pipeline of interest in manufacturing careers. Changing the perception of manufacturing is critical to engaging youth. Three initiatives led by the National Association of Manufacturers and its affiliate, the Manufacturing Institute, Dream It, Do It, CareersWanted.org, and National Manufacturing Day showcase the tremendous innovation and technology that our sector brings to the world. ClickBond regularly opens our doors to our facilities to engage with students, parents, teachers, and the broader community to show that our shops are clean, high-tech, and fun. Third, we changed our internal focus and lived up to what we were asking of the education system in Nevada. We shifted our recruitment and talent development processes to require the programs and the certifications that we advocated as a means for eligibility. Once in the door, we offer full tuition reimbursement for any employee who wishes to advance his or her education. Employees who want to earn more money, offer greater value, and grow their career trajectory are fully supported. And when they earn those certifications, they experience an increase in pay and opportunities to grow their career path. Manufacturers and other employers cannot afford to sit on the sidelines. We are taking action every day, but we also need Congress to do its part and support public-private partnerships that advance our workforce needs. The opportunities are tremendous in manufacturing, and placing the right people in these jobs takes time, resources, and serious commitment. ClickBond has found our engagement rewarding, and we hope that Congress can make it easier for employees to pursue workforce strategies that are successful. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to tell my company's story.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. I appreciate your testimony. Thank you to all of the witnesses. And now we're going to move to member questioning of the witnesses, and we'll start with the chairwoman of the Ed and Workforce Committee, Dr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and I want to, again, thank our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Partridge, in your testimony, you described how you were spreading your resources among too many programs and initiatives prior to development of the tech talent pipeline, therefore undermining its impact. How did you determine which of these initiatives to cease funding and which to continue funding?
Thank you, Dr. Fox, for that question. It wasn't an easy decision. We tried to make it data-based. 2 years ago, we started a group within the college. It's our labor market analytics group, where they look at real-time data about what the job market can't find. They look at the skill sets of those jobs and see if where we're producing them, where we're not producing them, and started to look at ways to sort of rank what our needs were. We are, like all institutions, underfunded. Enrollment's flat, so we're sort of struggling to keep up with demand. I get employers in my office every day asking us to start new programs to meet their needs, and we really have to make some tough decisions. So we looked at the ones that were at risk of flight. Like if we didn't invest in dollars to upskill our local workforce, those employers would have to leave the market and take those jobs elsewhere. Retail jobs, healthcare that are serving local populations are less at risk of flight than those might be IT or other jobs. So we really try to make it a data-driven approach.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it. I paid attention to the comment you made, the phrase you used, students are pushing through now and we want to pull them through. I'm not very good at making images, but what I thought about was maybe it would be good to have something well-oiled, a well-oiled pathway, so instead of they're pushing or you're pulling, they can just get on a glide path that will get them to where they need to go. And that's sort of the image that came up in my mind. Mr. Kobe, I'm very familiar with the T10 program. There's a fantastic partnership between Toyota and Forsyth Tech and Winston-Salem, as you know. One question that people ask is, how does Toyota ensure the rigor of this program is consistent when offered at so many different community colleges.
That's really the beauty of the system. It's very intentional, it's very structured, and they have three main strategies. One is the material and the practices, the procedures, and it's for the colleges and the dealerships. Curricula, worksheets, work journals, evaluation forms, you name it, they've thought of it. The second stratagem is the 2-year approval process for the colleges. So they're assessed, then they have to make a lot of changes. They have to develop several units of curriculum. It's very, and it's all reviewed. And the third stratagem is peer pressure. So Toyota has built a national network of these 36 colleges, and they watch each other, and they set the bar. They meet once a year. There are classes at that conference, and that curriculum that the colleges create has to get reviewed by your peers. So they're all kind of competing, and it's really a great system.
Great. Mr. Costello, what advice do you have for employers in other states as they look to emulate what you have done to be partners more effectively with their state and local educators?
We have an employee at ClickBond who said, God gave us 2 of these and 1 of these for a reason. And so I would say start by listening and just understanding what exists, what programs exist, what the current state is. And then I think come to the table ready to partner, ready to engage. One of the things we've seen in Nevada is a lot of employers are really just trying to make payroll by the end of the week. And so those who maybe have the luxury of being a little more comfortable, if they can take a little more of the ownership and create the venues and invite other employers to the table and help educate them, that's a big piece. We spend a lot of time educating our colleagues who maybe don't have the luxury to engage as thoroughly.
Great. Well, again, I want to thank all of you all for coming and giving us great examples. We know these examples exist around the country, and we want to applaud those who are being innovative and going out there and meeting the needs. I can't let this hearing go by without making a plug for Prosper, because what we're hoping to do with Prosper is to open up the eyes of places that aren't doing this and giving them more encouragement. Funding the short-term programs, Mr. Partridge, you talked about through Pell would be so great. Getting people to understand tuition reimbursement that's out there. But we just desperately need all of these programs all over the country. And we hope that Prosper will spur a lot of schools on and a lot of employers on to take advantage of what can be done. Thank you all again very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox. With that, we'll go to the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mrs. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in many ways, the chairwoman just mentioned several of the issues that we've been looking at. And I wanted to ask you, because we talk about the fact and we know that private sector investment has fallen off. So what is it that you feel, and I can direct this to Ms. Taffany, and Mr. Kobe at the beginning, is how we spread that message. And what is it that you think is actually compelling to employers to think more creatively about this and how they can be a greater part of it? What's going on? You want to start, Ms. Taffany?
I think that one of the things that we've seen in Minnesota is that we've had employers in my area who've been working with a local community and tech college for a decade already. And early on, there weren't as many employers who were worried about a skills gap, weren't thinking about the retirement of baby boomers coming up. But I think as the labor market has tightened and it's become increasingly difficult to find people, employers realize they no longer have the luxury of sitting on the sidelines and waiting for something to happen. And it's an all hands-on effort in order to solve this particular problem. So I think the intensity of just the tightening labor market is affecting that. In Minnesota, I can tell you, as part of our Governor's Workforce Development Board, we've spent a lot of time recently looking at employer engagement, looking to see what data was available, looking to see what other states are doing. In Minnesota, we've come up with a plan to try to help engage employers even further beyond what we've already doing by looking at examples, talking more publicly. Luckily in Minnesota, we have very open community and tech colleges who are inviting employers in. And so I think it's becoming easier to engage.
Yeah, one of the things you did mention is having the teachers involved, seeing what work looks like today on a different scale, and I think that's something important. Also, counselors as they work with young people. Ms. Jacoby?
Yeah, I think what's needed is a shift in culture. I think a lot of employers have come to the thinking that it's somebody else's responsibility, the government, the educational system, the students themselves, and we need to shift that. And that's going to be important, not just because they're going to get involved and put muscle in it, but because of quality control. They're really going to insist that it's good and that it meets their needs. So, you know, the question is how to shift that culture, and I think it's starting to shift, and so some good examples in the tight labor market. I think there may be a role for government in priming the pump in some ways and prosper and ways to do it. I think there's also a question of what are the models? You know, I run a coalition of employer associations, and my members get calls every week. Some employer that says, I'm desperate for workers, I'm willing to put time in it, I'm willing to put money in it, what the heck do I do? And the problem is what the government holds out now is that gold standard program, which is registered apprenticeship, but not everybody can do an apprenticeship, and we don't hold up some of these other models that are, you know, I think of them as apprenticeship is the marathon, where's the 10K and 5K and 1K race? I think we should be doing more to hold up those models so employers have something they can take off the shelf and do in their community.
Yeah, and you offered one. I think one of the questions around that in looking at some other models and in other countries as well is how when you have a program like the Lenore Spirit, how does the portability of those skills transfer?
Well, that's the beauty of what Lenore has just done in creating a program where they get a certification. And it's a nationally recognized certification, and then they can use that certification if they come back later in life toward credit. And that's exactly the challenge. How do you make that non-credit program, which is so flexible and so good for the moment, meaningful for the student later on? But it's the certifications and it's that articulation at the college.
And the nationally registered comes about because of what interface?
Nationally registered, associations create these certifications.
Okay, so that is an important piece of it. I wanted to clarify that. And Mr. Partridge, very, very quickly, you talked about data and how important that is. And I think in recognizing that we also need to know student data, do you envision and how we can use data to spread the word about what's available? I think we all would love to see students going online as they do for colleges today and finding out what kind of programs are out there, what kind of apprenticeships, what kind of stackable credentials, so that they maybe can even move from an area in order to access a program that really meets their needs.
Yeah,
how do we do that?
The data we've been pulling, one of the big keys to success is making it understandable. Because you've got two PhDs in a room crunching numbers. They can create data, but is it useful to teachers or parents? So we actually go into the K-12 system and we do programs with teachers, showing them really what's needed in Northern Virginia, what are the degrees that lead to these jobs, and how you can get in short-term training like credentials that might get you that first job right out of high school. If you really don't know what you want to do, but you want to try the workforce first, there are ways to map this out and make it easy for people to understand, but it does take a little effort.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Next, we have the chairman of this subcommittee, Chairman Guthrie, who would be in this seat, but is juggling his time between a markup and votes at another committee. So, Chairman Guthrie, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you sitting in the chair. I know these are issues extremely important to you. We've discussed them quite often and quite everywhere I go at home. That's what businesses are talking about, and I think that's one of the things that I didn't foresee as quickly and when the tax cuts came, that people immediately started investing in their employees because they're afraid they're going to lose them. And so it became a race to bonuses and benefits in some companies. So it just shows that companies are focused on their employees. And when we call the skills gap, I kind of say generation gap, because I actually was born in a town that had a Ford plant, Reynolds, a big blue-collar presence for TVA. And they did all the training. If you're millwright, tool and die, whatever, you're 18 years old, you graduated from a high school, if you knew somebody could get you on at Ford or Reynolds, you were set until when I was a senior in high school. My dad worked there, and they decided to close the plant, which was horrible for that community, but it took us to Kentucky, so in a way we had a bright spot of it. But that's the generation gap, because people just quit doing it. And all of a sudden you had all the skilled trades. They weren't hiring, they weren't growing, these big businesses, so they didn't really need to bring people in. And one of you said it's the baby boomers retiring, and all of a sudden we're a generation without the kind of skills. But it's not just the blue-collar skills either. It's all so much there. But where you go, every chamber of commerce, every business, every school, in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, in Hardin County school system, there's just a fantastic center where they have them go through robotics. They're learning a lot of things. And we also always tell them every time I go to one, it's all this fun stuff, and kids are learning, and they're doing robots and so forth. We still need HVAC and those kinds of things as well. Matter of fact, most HVAC people are going to be small business men and women as well. But I got a couple of questions I want to get to. And again, I want to thank Mr. Smucker for sitting in the chair. But first, for Mr. Partridge, in your testimony, you described how work-based learning opportunities benefit Northern Virginia students. Are there benefits to work-based learning beyond learning technical skills? And would expanding work-based learning opportunities for secondary students improve their preparedness for the workforce?
Definitely. I think there's a lot of spillover effects, as I mentioned in my opening statement. Most students don't go into the workforce during high school. They didn't do that summer job. So they didn't pick up those soft skills, show up on time, don't wear flip-flops, certain things that you might see when you first hire that college student showing up to the workplace, and then you call the university president and say, what are you turning out over there? They don't have a lot of these soft skills. And they used to get that on the job previously, and people are defraying work to get extracurricular activities, to focus on studies. So the theory's there, but the practicality of the soft skills isn't really baked in. You can't really practice it until you actually have the job. The danger that lately we've seen with employers, they are doing internships, but it's more of as a recruitment tool. They use it as a college to sort of pluck people and try them out before they buy them and offer them the full-time job. What they've given up on is the high school of offering that as a way to generate interest for liability issues, for issues that now most internships have to be paid in the view of most companies. So the cost has gone up, but they've sort of backed away from that. And so we're trying to force more of that into the high schools because we think you can make better career decisions if you actually see what work is like early on. Because right now there is a career awareness system. It's called college, and it's probably the most expensive place you could do it. So we need to get it done and push it down into the K-12 system more.
Okay, thank you. And let me go to Ms. Jacoby. In your testimony, you described the support Toyota provides to dealers participating in the T10 program. What are some of the skills employers need to develop in order to improve the efficacy of their workforce development efforts?
That's a great question. On the employer side of this, work-based learning is not easy. I mean, imagine having a 17, 18-year-old in your office who's never had a job before. Toyota schools them. They actually call it training for dealerships. And it's about structuring the program and figuring out what the young person is going to do, giving them appropriate tasks and so forth. Toyota does it for their on-the-ground dealerships. In other cases, companies hire intermediaries. There's a whole world of profit and for-profit shops emerging that help employers figure that out. I think in some great cases the schools can help, the colleges or the high schools work closely with the employer. It can make a big difference. It's often overlooked. Forgive me, I meant to look last night and I didn't. I don't know if Perkins money can be used for the schools to help do that, but it's a really important part of it. The work-based learning is key to making this work, and employers don't know how to do it often.
Okay, and Mr. Costello, if I can get this question in quickly. In your testimony, you described the local community college machining curriculum aligns with different industry-recognized standards. Were there changes to the school's curriculum that were needed to accomplish this alignment? And what consideration do you give potential job seekers who have a credential aligned to a different manufacturer?
Good question. Yes, we did early on when we were evaluating, probably the better part of a decade ago, found there were machining courses, but the equipment and the overall curriculum hadn't been refreshed. There frankly wasn't a huge demand for these folks, and so when we engaged, we really looked for what is the gold standard, if you will, for machining, and the National Institute of Metalworking Skills is something we all felt was really top-notch. And so we worked to channel state funds as well as WIOA, or whatever it was at that time, those kinds of funds, to build a curriculum that would generate students with those certifications at the end.
Thanks. My time's expired, though, so I appreciate it. I got the answer. Okay. I appreciate it very much, and thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Guthrie. Next, I'd like to recognize the ranking member of the Full Ed and Workforce Committee, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, according to the National Skills Coalition in 2015, 49% of all jobs in the Commonwealth of Virginia were middle-skilled jobs, and thanks to the leadership at the state level, the Commonwealth has taken initiatives to invest in our workforce through a strong commitment to WIOA and the workforce development system, in registered apprenticeship programs like those at Nupanu Shipbuilding. Unfortunately, employers nationally have actually decreased investments in training and education in their workforces, according to the Aspen Institute. Between 2003 to 2013, employer-sponsored on-the-job training fell by 40%. Now, we can afford federal spending for job training, but what's concerning is that Congress continues to pass massive tax cuts to corporations who promise that workers will reap the benefits. But even today, supporters of the law have noted that workers are not receiving the increased wages or other benefits that they were promised. I support the industry leadership in workforce development training, but I think Congress has a significant role to play in investing in our nation's higher education system, proven training models like registered apprenticeships, CTE, and WEO system. But employers also have to take up some of the slack. Ms. Tappan, short-term programs have been mentioned. Can you talk about the importance of requiring quality in these programs and what we can do to make sure there's quality before they start dipping into the Pell Grant system?
Yes, thank you for your question. I think that the short-term programs are very important to employers because there are many skills that people can learn to get on the job quickly, and that is something that's needed right now. We don't have years to wait for our educational systems to be training employees before they enter the workforce. So through those short-term training programs, and in partnership with our community and technical colleges working with employers, I feel that we are ensuring that we're receiving quality trained employees as they come out of those systems. In Minnesota, I have participated on a number of curricula review with my community and technical college when they're adding new programs. There are other employers at the table working to ensure that the skills that we're looking for and the outcomes of those programs meet our needs. So I have personal experience with employees coming out of short-term training programs who can get on the job, receive additional on-the-job training when they get into my company. They're being successful, they're contributing to the company, and their wages have been steadily increasing.
If the federal government is going to invest in these programs, how do we make sure that the money only goes to quality programs and not kind of home-baked things that don't work?
Yes, I think that's an excellent question. In the rural area in which I live, the majority of training is being done by our state community and technical college. And I believe that they have proper oversight and their programs are being improved and approved, the curricula is, that employers are engaging. So in my experience, those short-term programs have been meeting needs. And so I'm speaking about Minnesota State Colleges and University system.
I think we're a little safer if the community college is running them rather than invest in private sector things that might work, might not. Can you make a comment about the difference between work requirements and safety net programs as opposed to workforce development?
Yes, I actually see those as two different things. Workforce development for me is an opportunity for an employee to receive classroom instruction, on-the-job training through certified programs that lead to credentials. That's workforce development, in my opinion. The other work requirements, oftentimes in Minnesota, I've seen those being a barrier to workers that are trying to get into the workforce system. Recently, we've been working with a short-term training program designed to train women specifically for welding, a field where women are significantly underrepresented. Welding is in high demand in our area. But without wraparound services and support from the state and the federal government, these women would not have the support they need to even get through a class, and so those are critical. As an employer, I can provide on-the-job training, I can provide funding for programs that people are taking that lead to credentials, but we're not in a position to provide human services to people or to convene the necessary people to provide the support that those people need for training.
Thank you. And final question is, we've heard about the Prosper Act, H.R. 4508, can you explain what effect cutting $15 billion from federal student aid would have, whether that would be positive or negative in closing the skills gap?
I don't think that it would provide a positive result. If anything, I think that we have, over the last few years as a nation, made significant progress towards moving workforce development forward, and anything that we do at this point that takes our foot off of the gas and slows down that progress is going to hurt American companies. We're in a situation right now where our economy seems to be growing. There's an opportunity for businesses to grow, for people to be moving into higher paying jobs and to create additional economic development. Anything that we do to slow that progress is going to hurt the United States.
Thank you, Ranking Member Scott. With that, I'd like to go to a member from Pennsylvania, Mr. Barletta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's no secret that the American workforce faces a shortage of roughly 6 million workers. As I travel around, not only in my district, but now the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it's something that I hear from employers all the time. We have jobs, we just don't have people with the skills to fill those jobs. And I know the importance of a skilled workforce. When I was mayor, we were meeting with a local economic development company, and they were talking about how they were bringing in a new employer that was going to create 600 jobs, and a local contractor jumped up and said, "Does the school district know about this?" And we paused and we said, "No." And it was like a red light went off that they should. If you're bringing in 600 employees, how many more children are going to be coming in? How are the schools going to be impacted? And we realized that there's a disconnect between communities and how they share information. So we started an organization called Partners in Education. We called it PI. We brought in the local industries because the biggest complaint is that we educate our children and they go off somewhere else because they can't find a job at home and people want to see their grandchildren. So this brings in the local industry, and we brought in the school district, and we brought in the students and formed this organization where the students got to see the opportunities that actually exist right at home. The industry got an opportunity to talk to the students, directly to the students, of what those opportunities are and the skills that are needed, and the school district became the conduit to teach the skills needed for our local industries. And that worked very well. It became a farm system really for our local businesses because they were able to hire employees that already had some of the basic work skills for their specific industry. And it was amazing, the thing that they talked about, some of the basic work skills that we take for granted is like the importance of showing up to work on time. Things we took that for granted, the importance of calling in ahead of time if you're ill, not 5 minutes before the shift's going to start. And one of the biggest complaints is we have trouble finding people who can pass a drug test. And I think they're some of our biggest obstacles. So my experience with PI showed me how important private industry input is in preparing our workforce. So my question, Mr. Costello, can you speak to your own experience with ClickBond and how federal, state, and local government work together to utilize similar results as PI?
Sure. Your comments about the entire ecosystem being on the same page was really important in Nevada's case. We obviously had a pretty rough time out of the Great Recession, and so everyone was at the table without egos, without agendas, just let's fix the problem, so that helped us. But bringing together everyone toward a common mission, which was let's get people back to work in good-paying jobs that will sustain this economy for the long run and not be so subject to recessions and things like that. And so one of the neat things was we had employers who were willing to sit at a table and have conversations about their skills. We were willing to define those skills using the common language between educators that are credentials and curriculum conversations. And then we were able to get the workforce development system to channel the federal dollars toward those programs that would actually result in a job and a career. And also work with the economic development folks to build the data around what types of jobs are going to be created. In Nevada, it's a lot of manufacturing technician type jobs. Those skill sets actually transfer into medical, they transfer into IT. With the convergence of technology, there's a lot of the training we're doing applies broadly. But yeah, I think just aligning the state allocated dollars, the federal dollars to really fund programs that resulted in jobs and career growth for people.
Yeah, especially in Pennsylvania, where natural gas, the natural gas industry is creating all kind of opportunities for people. They can't find welders. Welders are earning 6 figures, and I don't know any unemployed plumbers in Pennsylvania. I don't think they're going to go out of business soon. There's diesel mechanics, very hard to get diesel mechanics. So I think part of the problem is that, we grew up in an age where you had to go to college, and after college, and now you had to go to graduate school, and we've gotten away from some of the vo-tech which had a stigma when I was back in the day, and now we have a shortage of workers. So I think we need to get back into the schools earlier to begin to show some students opportunities that they might have. So a quick question is, what else can we do to emphasize career technical education at an early age, Mr. Partridge?
Well, one, I think you're exactly spot on when you say, the K-12 system has for a long time not really been seen as part of the workforce system. And when businesses do want to engage with K-12, often they sort of hit roadblocks sometimes. You may have a principal that has a program. When I used to be in Charlotte, North Carolina, Olympic High School was great with manufacturers. They had a gentleman there that was out there talking with them all the time, so he was able to create that partnership. But I talk to a lot of businesses that want to engage that often don't know where to call. Do they call the school? They call the district office, and they don't know what to do with them sometimes. So making it easier for business to engage is part of the problem.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Barletta. And with that, we'll go to a member from North Carolina, Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the ranking member, and I'm kind of filling in for her right now. But also want to thank the witnesses for your testimony today. Ms. Tapani, it's clear that your company has made it a priority to invest in your workers and help them develop their skills. How difficult would it be for your company to thrive if you pursued a strategy of only identifying and hiring applicants that already had the necessary skills on day one?
That's a great question, and it has somewhat of an easy answer, because the answer was, if we looked for someone who had exactly the skills we needed, we'll actually never be able to hire anyone. It's a very rare occurrence when someone would walk through the doors having all of the skills that we're looking for today. And I can assure you, when they do walk through my doors, even if I didn't have a position opening, I would do everything I could to hire that person. After having attended meetings for years, listening to business owners in Minnesota talk about the fact that they couldn't grow their companies because they couldn't find the right set of skills that they were looking for, I decided that in Wyoming Machine we needed to do something about it. And so I started thinking about what kind of skills might kind of be like manufacturing that we could build upon. So in the example that I gave earlier about hiring somebody from fast food, that's an area where it's highly process-oriented, which is a critical skill in manufacturing. We took some risks, started hiring some people in that industry, and we have been very successful with supplementing their skills with on-the-job training, as well as training through our local community and technical college, and that seems to be working very well.
Okay, let me ask about STEM backgrounds. What kind of outreach do you do to conduct, what kind of outreach do you do to identify those candidates who you would need with STEM backgrounds, and where are you trying to find them?
So we're reaching back into the K through 12 system, as I mentioned during my testimony. We do that actually all across the state of Minnesota because myself and my sister, who is my co-president at Wyoming Machine, have been actively engaged in workforce. We get invitations from all across the state to engage with people as young as middle school and elementary school, talking about STEM careers, introducing them to manufacturing and the many other STEM careers that are existing in our economy. We are partnering with Robotics Teams, providing support and funding. Sometimes they come into our facility and we help them with building projects that they're doing on their robots or consulting with them about different kinds of material. As I already mentioned, we're providing financial support. We do talks at schools. I send out people that are actually shop floor employees in my company to meet with students in local high schools to talk about career paths that exist in Minnesota. So for us, it's kind of an all hands-on effort, reaching out to every avenue that's available to try to make sure that students know what opportunities are available and what training is available in Minnesota.
Okay, so what kind of impact has decreased funding for workforce development, particularly WIOA and CTE, had on your company's efforts to have a strong work base?
You know, I think in my individual company, we are doing everything that we can, and I'm not sitting around waiting for the federal government to necessarily provide that support, but because I serve on the Governor's Workforce Development Board, I also see kind of how that impact is affecting our state as a whole. And under WIOA, as you all know, we've been implementing that across the United States over the last couple of years. States have spent a huge amount of time and energy, business people, people in the state and local governments developing those plans, But as we keep decreasing the funding that we're seeing, we've invested a lot of resource. People have created amazing plans that in Minnesota we find are working. We have a solid workforce system with lots of engagement that can produce the workers that we're looking for. But without funding to support that, it's going to make it very difficult to continue that work.
Thank you. Let me quickly, Mr. Partridge, I wanted to ask you, you know, I have some fears about when we talk about training the workforce that certain populations get left behind. So what is NVCC doing to ensure that in cybersecurity apprenticeship and other wonderful programs that you have at NOVA, what are you doing to ensure that young people of color are entering and completing these programs and getting good jobs?
That's a great question. I think when you talk about the solution for cybersecurity, we need to have everyone at the table because we don't have enough people in those fields. So women, minorities aren't really being represented as much as they should in these fields, and that's partly because we don't have some of those programs in the high schools to sort of encourage them to participate. So we are working with our school districts as part of our tech talent pipeline to make sure that the awareness is happening long before high school, middle school, elementary, to let them know the students, the parents, the teachers about these opportunities and what these jobs pay. But there's also a big piece of, you know, the businesses need to offer these internships. We need to encourage businesses to offer, especially those schools that may not have the example at home. The greater Washington area has a lot of very smart people here, and sometimes their kids get access to these opportunities for internships and career awareness things, and others don't. So we need to make sure it's distributed equally and fairly to make sure those opportunities are available to all.
So are you looking at identifying those students of color or
We are,
specifically?
yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. With that, I'd like to recognize a member from Georgia, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panel today for giving us your expertise. Obviously, closing the skills gap is critical. We all understand that. I was doing some research. We're spending about 7.6% of GDP on education in our country, which leads the average of all other developed countries. They spend an average of about 6.3% on education, yet we rank 31st among developed nations. So we got a problem here. And of course, that's what this hearing is about, is how do we fix this problem? We've got Army Cyber Command moving to my district in Augusta. I just met with the Cyber Command, and their biggest concern with moving is education for those who will be not only needed in the workforce, but also for the children of those who are moving to the area. And, you know, I hear these comments from every industry I visit. You know, jobs available, we can grow our business, but we don't have the skilled workforce. You know, this committee has taken action to help close this gap, but obviously, well, let me just say this. What I realized coming from the business community is that I had no idea of the disconnect between the business community and the education community. I think, Ms. Jacoby, you sort of mentioned that the business community is out there just expecting the education community to produce the skilled workforce. And so my first question would be to you, how do we close, what are we doing to close that gap? Because like I said, we're spending a lot of money, putting a lot of effort into this. How do we close that gap and close this, fix this problem?
No, you're absolutely right. The employers and connecting the employers and the educators, that's the critical ingredient of the new career education that makes it different from the old voc ed, because it means that students are really going to be learning skills that they need in the job, not, you know, the coding of last year or the welding of a decade ago. So making those connections is key, and it's not easy. You know, I sometimes say employers are from Mars and educators are from Venus. You know, they don't even really know how to talk to each other. You know, employers are in a hurry and they want to get stuff done, and they talk about what's the plan, and educators talk in acronyms, and, you know, it can be, not acronyms, you know, abbreviations. It can be hard to make it work. increasingly it's happening. And it's happening often one-on-one between the employers and the educational institutions, and often a cluster of employers and the educational institution. And again, I think what we need to be doing is lifting up those templates, showing employers how. Because a typical employer, you know, I need skilled workers. Am I going to call the community college? They don't know anyone at the community college. Am I going to call the high school? They don't know anyone at the high school. Efforts like Congressman Barletta described, where you bring people to the table, are incredibly useful. WIOA requires more of that bringing to the table, and that's all critically important. There's kind of a scale of employer engagement from information at those tables to the kind of involvement I described that's really the intensive, hands-on. It's all really important.
Mr. Casella, I realized another thing when I was in a third grade classroom, that if you're not reading at the third grade level, when you finish the third grade, that you're probably not going to graduate from high school, which is that skills gap we're talking about that you mentioned in your testimony, where you have folks showing up wanting a job, but they don't have the, say, the reading or math skills to do the job. How do we fix that? In other words, when I go into a school, I will ask the class, okay, why are you getting an education? Many of them don't know. And so I have encouraged the business community to go to the first, second, and third grade and let these young people go see your operation, go see what the future holds. I didn't think, you know, I thought it'd be middle school, but they say by the time they get to middle school, if you don't have them, you've lost them. So have y'all looked at any programs like that about getting these young people earlier to understand that the opportunities available to them out there?
Yes, engagement is really critical. The earlier, the better. Our Dream It, Do It program in Nevada really strives to do that, as well as Manufacturing Day, just opening up the doors of our businesses to show what we do and to go to the schools as well. We have an army of young manufacturing employees who are very enthusiastic, understand the importance of skills, and they become the ambassadors for us too, so they can speak a common language. In addition, we engage the State Department of Education to really help them understand what we mean when we say we can't find the right people. We're talking about reading, math, and problem solving. In our state, using districts to grant diplomas, they kind of vary from district to district. There's just no way to govern that. We've rallied around ACT's National Career Readiness Certificate as an assessment tool of reading, math, and problem solving, and the state's actually been very receptive to trying to pilot that and then make it part of the exit requirements from high school, which helps align us a little better.
Thank you very much. Now I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I'd now like to recognize a member from Colorado, Mr. Paulus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this hearing today. Colorado recently announced a new public-private partnership known as CareerWise, which has a goal of training 20,000 students for need-based, high-paying jobs through apprenticeships while they're in high school. Students actually take courses and get the hands-on experience and credit, and they have the option of going straight into the workforce or continuing their education, and we're very excited about growing this program to scale. Now, that's hardly a new idea. Unions have been leading the way in apprenticeships for decades. I was fortunate to be part of our committee's bipartisan delegation to visit a local IBEW program in Maryland a few weeks ago, where they've been training students for good-paying electrical jobs for years. And I visited similar union apprenticeship programs in Colorado. And I know that it's very important for our committee and Congress to continue to encourage and support these kinds of programs. In Denver, the Career Education Center Early College Magnet School prepares students for the workforce by providing career technical education through dual and concurrent enrollment programs. The students graduate with associate's degrees. In Greeley, Ames Community College launched an early college high school where students earn their associate's degree the same time they earn their high school diploma as well. And concurrent enrollment is really a proven method for supporting first-generation college goers, those who might have trouble affording college, helping students achieve not only a great education, but a skill that allows them to get a good job in the workforce, or if they choose, go on to transfer to complete a 4-year degree. I wanted to go to Mr. Partridge first. If you can talk about the role of concurrent enrollment, how it can support first-generation students, and how Congress can do a better job supporting dual and concurrent enrollment.
Yes, thank you for that question. Yeah, we are actually in the Commonwealth going through a discussion on how we sort of standardize dual enrollment. It's been sort of a hodgepodge approach across the Commonwealth. We actually offer it across all our districts in Northern Virginia at no charge to the students. Other parts of the state do charge, so I believe there's going to be a $50 fee going forward per credit hour. The challenge for us is making sure people really understand what dual enrollment means.
And how does that $50 compare to if they were out of high school, if they were paying the full charge for the course?
About $170 a credit.
So it's about less than a third the cost.
Yeah. So it's a very affordable way to pursue college degrees, but what people don't realize sometimes is knowing what your end goal in mind is when you get that college credit, because parents hear dual enrollment college credit and they assume my son's going to tech someday, this is automatically going to transfer, and it really depends the course and how it transfers. So we're trying to do a better job making sure the pathways forward for students is very clear, that if their goal is a bachelor's degree, it's easy for us to grant dual enrollment as a 2-year institution, but if they want to keep going, which in this area many jobs do require eventual bachelor's degree, we need to make sure up front we've had those conversations. Also, teacher certification for dual enrollment is a challenge. With the accreditation, we have to have 18 credit hours in the subject matter area and a master's degree.
It's usually a master's degree in the subject area, right? And about what % of the high school teachers have master's degrees in the Commonwealth or in the area?
I'm not familiar with the number, but I know like hot topics like cybersecurity, we have no one almost in the K-12 system in Northern Virginia who is qualified to teach cybersecurity classes.
Sir, Mr. Jacoby, do you want to address dual and concurrent enrollment and ideas about how we can better support it?
I'll take up the last topic, the accreditation issue. It's a problem across these programs where there's no alternative to that master's degree. Obviously in some things you do need a master's degree, but why not have at least the possibility of a master's or? I do think that the Prosper Act made big strides in streamlining what the accreditors should be looking at, less inputs and more outcomes. And I think we do need more of that, and that would, we do need quality control is important. I'm not saying ignore the quality control, but quality should be about outcomes and not about inputs.
Mr. Pani, I introduced a bill, a bipartisan bill with Rodney Davis, Scott Peters, and Elise Stefanik called the Employee Participation in Student Loan Assistance, which would allow employers to provide student loan repayment assistance as a tax-excludable benefit to their employees. I think it's an example of a way we can work together to build a better connection between the education system and the workforce. Are there other policy levers that you would suggest that can create a better link between the workforce and the education system?
I think one of the things that just recently came up in the comments here is this idea of dual enrollment. And I think that as a nation, we have a lot of opportunity to consider what policies we could put in place to continue to expand this dual enrollment idea at the career and technical college level, and not just look at it as an opportunity for students who plan to get a 4-year degree or some other advanced degree. In Minnesota, there has been a lot of conversation about that. I believe that there have been some pilots around that. But I do think that for the skills gap that we're trying to close, that would be an opportunity to continue to move forward, is to look at how we could expand on that.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Pallas. I'd now like to recognize a member from Minnesota, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panel. Speaking of dual enrollment, I'm glad we brought that up because I'm proud to say that my amendment on dual enrollment in the Perkins bill was passed unanimously and passed the House, and we're trying to get the other chamber to move and get this thing done because dual enrollment can provide exactly what Ms. Tapani was talking about. If you don't have shop class anymore, we're not exposing kids in K through 12 to these mechanical trades and career and technical education, they ought to have an opportunity to go to the local technical college or community college to get this and then make certain they're getting credit, which obviously will reduce their burden once they get out of high school. So it's a very, very important topic to me. As is the idea of short-term career-focused eligibility for Pell Grants. I think we definitely need to expand on that. But when we're talking about things, and by the way, Ms. Tapani, welcome. Great to have another Minnesotan in the room. Congratulations, what you're doing. But we're talking about that, though. It seems to me we're sort of missing the elephant in the living room, and that is, well, we're talking about dual enrollment. We're talking about Pell Grants being expanded into career and technical fields or short-term educational fields. Used to be when I was in high school, that's what you got in high school. You got exposed to all sorts of things. You know, you'd have a youngster who's having trouble academically, and they get their head under the hood of a car, and a light bulb goes off, and they were exposed to that. To Mr. Partridge's point, not to have to make that leap, okay, I'm going to do this for sure in 9th grade, but I'm going to get this exposure in K through 12, and I don't want to get my BA. I can go to the technical college. What happened? I mean, and I'll just open up to the panel, but why aren't we doing that in K through 12 anymore?
Well, vocational education got a bad name about 20 years ago, in part because it wasn't always as good as it should be. It often was a track, and employers weren't involved enough, and so kids weren't necessarily learning skills for real jobs, or they weren't learning skills for exciting, high-end jobs and well-paying jobs. Thank goodness it's coming back. The pendulum's swinging back. It's been doing it the pendulum's been swinging back for about 5 to 10 years, and the new CTE, as it's often called, is different from the old voc ed, and it's catching on around the country. Not enough.
It'd come back a lot quicker if we had accreditation reform. I mean, if you have somebody, I mean, let's be honest, I think Bill Gates and the late Stephen Jobs never finished college, but you wouldn't want him teaching a computer science class in high school, would you? A little dangerous. I mean, it becomes a little bit ridiculous after a while, does it not?
100% with you on that. I mean, why is this program that I talked about in North Carolina happening in the non-credit division? Because it's too hard to put it on in the credit division. You know, let's fix that.
In a perfect world, Ms. Topani, we talk about these employer-educator partnerships, and as I say, in Dakota County Technical College, just a little south of Stacy there, they're working hard on that. But in a perfect world, if you could opt for this sort of partnership and work with a local institution, or you had federal work-study dollars that could flow directly to your company for you to train people on the job, what would you prefer?
My preference actually is to work with the community and technical college. And there are 2 reasons for that I can think of off the top of my head. First is that I think that as educators, our community and tech college can provide some curriculum and some professional, well-thought-out education that I cannot provide in my own facility. So I mentioned already that welding is a STEM career. There is science and technology that needs to be understood by a welder in order for them to do their job well. I can't teach that theory very well, but we can teach the hands-on portion. So we're happy to do that, and we partner with our tech colleges to do that. The other thing is, I think that it's in the best interest of all Americans when workers can get actual portable, recognized certificates and credentials from a community and tech college. We have a workforce today that moves around a lot. Businesses come and go. People have to move to different communities because that's where jobs are. And it's in the best interest of both the employer and the student if they have recognized portable credentials.
Final question for the panel. Is there a danger of a little mission creep here? We've got a plethora of 4-year liberal arts institutions in Minnesota and around the country. Most do a good job, notwithstanding escalating costs, which we've got to get a handle on. But above and beyond that, we need the options for career and technical education. Sometimes are you seeing the community college universe try to expand and almost get into things where, no, we've got 4-year liberal arts schools for that. We need this to stay focused on some trades.
Yeah, I think there is a danger of that. You're seeing more 2-year schools start to offer 4-year degrees. In Northern Virginia, we've actually said, just from a cost standpoint, it would be better if we could partner with a senior institution like George Mason, which we have an advanced program, which students can come in starting this year, declare that they want to go to GMU, and they're dual admitted and dual enrolled in both institutions. So they carry an ID for both institutions and make their way through, because we didn't want to go down the route you discussed.
Unfortunately, my time is up. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Next, I'd like to recognize a member from Delaware, Ms. Blunt-Rochester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the panel. This is a great discussion. It's good you're sharing some examples of things that are positive and that are working. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to visit the Amazon Fulfillment Center in my state and hear about some of the opportunities that they're providing. This week, I was on the phone with Home Depot. They shared with me some of the innovative things that they're doing. And just yesterday on a committee hearing, we were talking about the future of work, and Wal-Mart actually presented what they're doing. And as I thought about it, and even in my own state, when we talked about pathways, we have a pathways program as well that went from less than 30 kids 4 years ago to over 9,000. I mean, so back to that culture shift that you were speaking of. When I think about the skills mismatch, I think about automation, I think about globalization, I think about the demographic changes I'm a baby boomer, and I was thinking, how many seconds? Every 9 seconds we retire. And what is clear is that we really need a national strategy for how we're dealing with this. And so as I think about my questions to you, I'm thinking of the other committees that I serve on. I was Secretary of Labor in the state of Delaware, so I was there for WIOA, you know. I'm now on the Agriculture Committee, and so on the Agriculture Committee, there's a lot of conversation about work requirements. Agriculture is talking about it for SNAP. I've heard Medicaid is being tied to work requirements, housing is being tied to work requirements, and TANF is being tied to work requirements. We all want people to have the ability to work. It is the thing that gives us pride. It is the thing that allows us to thrive. There's no doubt about that. One of my questions is about all of these different groups coming out with these proposals for work requirements, mandatory work requirements, at a time when you're seeing people come into the workplace that are not prepared at a basic level and then potentially can be kicked off of their benefits. I was interested, Mr. Costello, in your program, and I would love to get more information in terms of how many people started and how many people finished. I just attended a graduation for a SNAP program, training program for culinary arts. 8 students entered, 4 graduated. And I was there when they entered on their first day, and I was there for the graduation. That's a lot. If you scale that, I'm talking 8 people compared to 8 million. We have a crisis here if we don't do it together. So I'll follow up with you afterwards about your program, but more generally speaking, I'm just curious about how you feel these supports, without these work supports, how will people be able to even participate in some of the great training that the private sector is providing and the public sector is providing? And I'll start with you, with Ms. Tapani. Is it Tapani or Tapani?
It's Tapani.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. You know, I think that you bring up a great point and a great question, and I think that if I'm up here at a 10,000-foot level looking down at what's going on in the workforce system, there's no one that I've ever encountered who wants anyone to misuse funds or take advantage of programs that are meant to help people and move them forward to higher paying jobs. In the state of Minnesota, one of the things we're working on in our governor's workforce development board is looking at all of these programs that you just mentioned in your statement and trying to figure out how can we braid funds together, how can we bring programs together to leverage them to the very best advantage that we can to help the people that need help. If we just had a presentation recently on adult basic education, you know, and that is a fundamental kind of program that I as an employer can't deliver to people. We need to convene the right people at a higher level, bring the right resources together to get people prepared for the workforce. When you've got your boots on the ground and you're working with human beings who are trying to access the workforce system, trying to get education and training to move into higher paying jobs so that they can support their families, what I see is they're making good use of the resources that are being brought to them. I can't provide them as a resource for the employee. I'm happy to pay for education. I'm happy to provide time on the job to do that, but I can't bring everything they need to make that happen to bear.
I only have 22 seconds, so I'm going to put out this question. I'm very much focused on the future of work, and one of the things you also mentioned was the braided funding. And what I would love to hear from you, again, it could be a follow-up, is braided funding is something that at a federal level we can do. On the local level, our Workforce Investment Board was key because we were tying local information with labor market information with the employers. And so I would love to follow up with you. My time has expired, but this is the most exciting. I'd love more time for this panel. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Blunt-Rochester. I'd like to now recognize a member from Illinois, Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member Davis, for calling this important subcommittee hearing. I also want to thank our distinguished witnesses for participating today. Thank you so much. Yesterday was a troubling day for the strength of our workforce, the success of our businesses, and the health of our economy. Yesterday, the Department of Labor revealed that the skills gap reached 6.6 million positions that have gone unfilled as of the month of March 2018. Another consecutive month where millions of good-paying job opportunities were left unfulfilled because employers couldn't find qualified candidates. If nothing else, yesterday was a friendly reminder that despite all the buzzwords and happy talk around Capitol Hill about workforce development, we as an institution are failing our workers and our businesses when they need us most. My bill with Congressman G.T. Thompson, the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act, addresses this critical issue by reauthorizing the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act, the program that provides workers with the skills, the education, and the on-the-job training to achieve successful careers in fields like manufacturing, cybersecurity, and agriculture. H.R. 2353 does three main things. One, it increases funding to Perkins CTE programs. Two, it shifts authority for spending this money from Washington to local institutions like community college and high school districts. And three, it brings business owners to the table to validate the skills that are taught in these CTE programs. My first question is to Ms. Tapany. Can you please explain how your family business has benefited from the Perkins CTE program? Do you think that strengthening the program will help more small businesses like yours train and retain workers?
I do think that it will help my business and others like me retain and continue to develop workers. One of the things that I would want people to know about that, though, is not like I receive money directly from a program like that. But as I've already told you, we engage heavily with our K-12 system as well as our community and technical school partners. They're the ones who are receiving those funds and making use of them. I mentioned in my testimony that we have teachers sometimes that do internships at Wyoming Machine. They could be back in their K-12 system developing programs that could lead to an engineering degree, that could lead to some career and technical education after high school. But if they don't get an opportunity to come to a place like Wyoming Machine, see manufacturing firsthand, how it's evolved over the years, how it's become more high-tech, and that there are more technical skills required, it's difficult for them to really talk to students in their classrooms about what's going on in manufacturing, in healthcare, in construction, all the changes that we're seeing in those skilled fields. So I do think it's critical.
Right. CT Perkins basically helps you to, it doesn't give money directly to businesses. It helps to essentially train workers to fill the jobs that have gone unfilled in your businesses. Thank you very much. Ms. Jacoby, it is my understanding that through Opportunity America, several advocacy organizations across diverse industries have voiced their support for CTE reauthorization. Can you explain why?
We have, because it does help to bring employers to the table. My coalition, the Opportunity America Jobs and Careers Coalition, which includes big construction trade associations, hospitality trade associations, a variety of associations across the spectrum, strongly supportive of that bill because of the work-based learning component, because it will encourage that and make it easier for schools to do it, because of the industry certifications that are baked into it and that it highlights and lifts up, and because of the way it will encourage schools to connect with employers. So again, that even if people are doing CTE, they're going to come out of the school system with the skill that employer needs, not the coding that they needed 5 years ago, or the welding that they needed 10 years ago.
Right. Thank you. It should come as no surprise that H.R. 2353 passed the House unanimously in June of last year. It is supported by nearly every education, labor, and business group under the sun. In fact, the Trump administration recently voiced their support for Perkins reauthorization as well. This is an overwhelmingly bipartisan issue that helps solve a serious, nonpartisan problem, the skills gap. Unfortunately, however, it appears that our colleagues in the Senate haven't taken action to do so much as even introduce a companion bill. In fact, since our bill passed the House in June 2017, the skills gap has increased by 6.5%, while unemployment has fallen. Speaking on behalf of the countless students, workers, and business owners whom I meet with every day, we're sick of the excuses, we're sick of waiting, and we're sick of inaction. I urge my colleagues in the U.S. Senate to pass our bipartisan Perkins reauthorization bill once and for all and pledge to continue fighting until we accomplish this goal. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Krishnamurthy. I'd like to now recognize a member from California, Mr. Del Sanye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank you and the panelists. This has really a daunting but very important discussion. Having been involved in local government in the state of California, where the workforce investment boards, the state and the local ones, one of the biggest challenges, I think, in this such a dynamic country with different needs in different areas is how do you take the best performing boards, the best partnerships, because it strikes me, for instance, in the county I'm from, we have a very strong industrial and chemical base. It's our industrial area in the Bay Area, 4 refineries, multiple chemical plants. And over the years, we've actually had a state bill that I was part of that required state-approved apprenticeship employees get to work there. It's worked. The refineries don't have explosions. They used to have lots of interruptions that affected the cost of gasoline on the West Coast. Now, 20 years later, the employers are happy. We've got kids in low-income areas that take classes in high school and get apprenticeship standards so that when they walk out the door, they're going to go to Chevron and get a job at $75,000 a year. So that's a high-performing board, but I've seen really poor-performing boards. So the secret sauce of getting the community college, all of these assets, to focus on what is a challenging work environment, and every area is different. I really think, I had these multiple conversations with the chair of the full committee here, how do we incentivize best practices for every workforce investment board as we roll this out? Maybe we start, whoever would start.
Well, one thing I want to add, Mr. Partridge is going to be able to speak to that because he ran a workforce board, a very good one, but the coordination between the workforce boards and the community colleges is a really critical issue. How many people got trained in the workforce system last year? 175,000. How many people go through community colleges? 12 million a year. And we have these two systems out there that are kind of duplicative and often don't coordinate well enough. And I think much more thought needs to be given to how to coordinate them. You know, there are a lot of good experiments going on around the country where they put the American Job Center on the college campus and they figure out ways to work together. But I think that's a big, important, unexplored area and one way to bring up the quality of some of those boards that we, are all troubled by.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll share. I ran Charlotte Works in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there's lots of good boards, lots of bad boards. Same with community colleges. I think the key is when you're trying to build a system, how we work together. Mm-hmm. I think a community, and it might be different quarterbacks in different communities. It might be the workforce board in one because they're very strong. It might be a community college in another. It may be a chamber of commerce somewhere else. But there has to be a system in every community that the employer knows how to gain these resources. It's troublesome that 30 years later, we still have a lot of businesses who don't know what the public workforce system is. Right. And the challenge with the public workforce system is once you actually get the word out and it takes off, you run out of money pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of really making sure that all those resources are aligned, that they're braided funding so that we aren't just dependent on the WIOA dollars, which we know won't go far, but how are we tapping the K-12 system? How are we putting it all together into a system? We've got programs out there, we don't have a system. And until we get to that consistently, we're still going to have these conversations 10 years later.
I would add to that, too. I think that under the Bipartisan Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, that many steps were taken, I think, to strengthen reporting, to strengthen data gathering so that we understand better which boards are performing well and which are not. I know in Minnesota we're getting ready to launch our dashboard, which will be a public dashboard, be available to anyone where people are going to be able to see, is the state using the funds that we have wisely to train people better for the workforce, and I think that we'll be seeing that across all states in the United States. So I think that's important.
Mr. Casella, anything?
So I think the question of what is working is an important one to ask. In our experience in Nevada, there are a lot of programs that are developing or training people. Are they working? I don't know that we know the answer to that holistically, and to what end. You can develop and train folks, but what's the outcome that it achieves? And I know for the most successful examples in Nevada's experience that we've been involved in, which took people from public assistance to jobs with benefits and 5 nationally portable certifications in 16 weeks. The unique piece there was that there were employers on the other side who had signed memoranda of understanding saying, if these people are delivered within this time frame with these particular skills, we will hire them at X wage. That was actually achieved. And to your comment about outcomes, I want to say like 98% of the people who started the program finished the program. And so when there's an employer demand that is really actually signed on a line that we're going to hire, that, at least in Nevada's experience, has really generated the full-blown momentum tip to tail.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we know that there are models out there that work, but we should accept the fact that this is a challenge when you've got the private sector, you've got multiple public agencies like community college districts, and I've seen them work, and I've seen some really horrible ones. So I actually did a bill in the legislature that was supported. My two sponsors were the Chamber of Commerce and the Labor Fed, and it was to require during the recession that at least 25% of the funds were spent on training. And there are a lot of people who didn't want to spend 25% of their funds. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Designier. I would now like to recognize Mr. Grothman for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Approximately 40% of the college students who start do not get a degree within 6 years. How many of those students you think would have been better off if they didn't go to a four-year institution and went somewhere else?
The answers itself, many. And you know, the part of the problem is good programs aren't available, and the culture, the broad national culture, you know, says everybody has to go to college. That's starting to change, but there's a lot more work to be done.
What do you think we can do? Or I'll ask you this question. Of the people every year who matriculate to a traditional four-year college, what % do you think would be better off if they didn't do that? You must have a guess.
I can't answer with an exact statistic.
I don't expect exact, just a guess.
I'm going to say 30.
Okay. Why don't we'll call on all four. Just guess. I mean, you're not. There's no penalty for guessing wrong.
Well, I don't know if I put it this way. I would say it's not an either-or scenario. It's one freeway of your life and your journey of being a lifelong learner. And there are lots of on and off ramps that include education, development work, certifications, degrees, steps toward degrees. And in terms of percentages, I couldn't answer that for you.
Well, somebody must guess. I guess all the time. You can guess. What % would be better off if you said, hey, have you thought?
I would say 100% would be better off if we weren't distinguishing between the different paths as roads that lead to one end, and instead looking at it as an integrated journey of lifelong learning. And 100% of people would benefit from knowing that there are lots of journeys people are going to take in their life.
Okay, look.
Yeah.
We all
You're
know
not going to be answering.
there are some people, I don't know what the average period of time to get a four-year degree is. My guess is it's probably 5 years. Many of these people wind up with student loans. Obviously, they're normally not working, at least at a traditional full-time job during those 5 years. So you're giving up 5 years of earning, you're digging yourselves into debt. I think you are always learning wherever you are in life. I don't think you have to go to a structured setting to be learning. I think that's snobby to imply those are the only people that are learning. We'll ask Mr. Partridge or Ms. Tapany here, give us your guess at the number of people in our society who matriculate every year at a four-year college who would be better off not making that decision.
That's a hard question, and I know you're going to force me to answer it. I would say the vast majority of people, when you look across the U.S., there are those with degrees and those without that usually have some college. And those with some college outnumber those with degrees because they didn't complete for some reason. Right. So I think the problem stems back to what I mentioned earlier is the lack of career awareness and what the different pathways are. What is the alternative to college if I want to go to the workforce? We don't do a good job at all communicating that information. It's just assumed you're going to college and you'll figure it out while you're there. And so for a vast majority of people, they may get the degree, but it still may not be in something they're actually interested in doing, and it might be in a job that doesn't pay wages to pay back the student loans. So there are better advising and better career awareness earlier would solve a good number of these issues.
What % you think are beginning, maybe, what % would you guess wildly made a mistake by starting in a four-year?
I think if you ask maybe someone who recently graduated and didn't get a job right away, that number would be larger. But if you look at the lifelong earnings and 50 years in the workforce, they usually realize as a company, you grow in a company, you need more skills, and a degree becomes required as you move up.
Nobody will say. Nobody can even guess. There's no penalty for guessing wrong. You won't just humor me and guess. It never occurred to you, despite the fact that all of you are part of kind of the education bureaucracy. This idea never occurred to you? That maybe some people are going to these colleges and not getting bang for the buck, and they go back to the tech school later on, or they get trained by a business, and they could have been trained by the business all along, or they could have gone to trade school and been making more money. I mean, in my district...
I'll comment. That is
no, don't comment, because you already said you can't answer the question.
Okay.
Ms. Tapany, do you want to give it a go?
I did guess 30%, but I would like to just say that in Minnesota and many other states, we're developing career pathways. I would advocate that it's a great idea if you don't know what you want to do, to potentially consider a community technical college to learn a skill in machining, for example. And if 5 years from now you're interested in becoming an engineer in the company you work for, you can take the credits that you've earned in Minnesota and continue on the path to a 4-year degree. So I would support training or educating students that they can start off in community and tech colleges, learn skills, get money, and avoid some of the debt they're currently facing.
Yeah, I'm going to endorse Mr. Costella's answer that 100% need to know more about the possibilities of starting with a partial thing with a community college, with a work-based learning, and can then potentially go on. And many more need to be encouraged.
Yeah, you guys have my head spinning. I didn't remember. Did you give me an answer, Mr. Jacoby?
Well, I'm going to say 100% need more awareness.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Grothman. And with that, I will recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. So first, I'd like to thank the chairman of the subcommittee for putting together what I think is a really fascinating hearing all of the stories you have in regards to workforce development in your areas, the opportunities that come with us with that. And I really do think this is one of the best opportunities that we have to make a difference in a variety of areas. And maybe I'll touch a little bit on that in my closing comments. But one of the things we haven't talked about today is really the economic side of this, if you will. And I was just recently, first of all, I was a construction company owner for years prior to serving in the state legislature and then here, and about 150 employees. So I sort of feel the pain of businesses who make decisions based on workforce availability. We spent an outsized amount of time, trying to figure out if we had enough employees available to participate in the jobs or to do the work in the jobs that we were bidding on. We were a fairly labor-intensive construction company, and so that was a big part of our decision-making. Just recently with a group of large staffing companies from around the country, some of the largest staffing companies, and they counted up among themselves, this was about half a dozen companies who had like 75,000 openings, companies they were representing. And we're saying that really companies today are making decisions based on workforce. And we sort of got tax reform right. We're incentivizing job creation here. We got the regulatory environment, made changes there that businesses are enthusiastic about investing in new jobs. But too often they're still making decisions to go overseas just because they simply have not, they don't have the workforce available. So, Mr. Partridge, your area, you have some larger government contractors and others in your area that, I'm sure you're working to fill needs there. But, I would guess that you probably have been able to, as a result of your efforts, you've seen other companies attracted to your area. But I'd like to hear from you, what's the situation on the ground in your area in that regard?
Obviously, this area is a very tight labor market like the rest of the U.S. IT skills, as I mentioned in my opening remark, is probably our biggest need right now. Companies are looking to expand here, but the number one question when they come here and talk to our economic developers is where will the talent pipeline come from? Other than stealing from my competitor down the street, what are my options? And unfortunately, unless we can get more kids going into the field, and we show them the data that we're getting more kids going into IT degrees, but it's not keeping up with pace.
So it's really a competitive advantage for communities as well, if they can get the workforce development right.
It is.
Ms. Jacoby, in my area, there's a number of organizations that are working together on some of these workforce programs. One of them, for instance, is the Community Action Agency in my district. And you know, they are working in conjunction with public assistance programs to help to improve the credentials of individuals and move them to a good paying job. And I guess I'd like to hear from you, what has been your experience? Do you think agencies such as CAP in my area can play a larger role, or what kind of partnerships are really important to developing a good community workforce development program?
Yes, there's no question that those partnerships are critical. I'm not aware of exactly what CAP does, but I think Mr. Partridge made a good analogy. It doesn't matter who quarterbacks it. The key in any local area is getting all the players together and figuring out what the synergies are and figuring out what the pathways are and using data to figure out what they need and to look at outcomes. It was the one question that didn't quite get enough of an answer, including from me. You know, I want to commend this committee on WIOA, you know, to look at outcomes. So in any community, yes, you need that quarterback to bring the groups together, look at what's needed, look at outcomes, and quarterback synergies.
Yeah. Mr. Costello, interested very much, and maybe like to talk offline later. I'd like to understand more about the work initiatives, specifically for individuals on SNAP, and be interested in hearing a little bit about your relationship with the state in terms of how you were connected to SNAP recipients, and you know how you found that collaboration with the state worked in your instance.
Well, in limited time, one of the keys in working.
I'll give you a little time. I have executive privilege.
You've got the gavel, right? One of the keys in our journey was knowing that by traditional methods, meaning high school diplomas, there may be the appearance that, you know, folks on public assistance might not have the ability to come work. What we found is when we used the National Career Readiness Certificate, that assessment, we actually were able to use, I don't know how all the dollars worked, but it was a partnership between the state Workforce Development Agency and then the community colleges and the employers. We were able to provide that assessment to interested people, and those who scored a certain level, there were actually quite a few people who have proficiency in the fundamental foundational skills of reading, math, and problem solving. They then became candidates for the program and were able to go learn some of the technical skills of machining and exit that program within 16 weeks with full-time jobs, benefits, and certification.
Thank you. Like I said, I would love to continue that conversation at some point. I believe that is all of our members. And so we'll close this hearing with a few closing remarks. Again, first I'd like to thank all of you for taking your time to testify before the subcommittee today. I thought it was a fascinating discussion and appreciate you being here. And now would like to recognize Ranking Member Adams for any closing remarks that she may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree. It has been fascinating, and I thank all the witnesses for your testimony. What we've heard consistently from each of you is a need to foster relationships among the employers, the K-12 system, and the CET system, community colleges, and others to meet the needs of the changing workforce. I'm glad to hear that through the changes made to the workforce system by WIOA that we're seeing more of these relationships. We need to encourage these relationships to grow. One way we can do this is at the federal level is continuing to invest in evidence-based high-quality training programs. I'm disappointed that instead of committing to increase investments in WIOA and CTE programs, that the committee passed on a bipartisan basis a bill that would cut $15 billion from federal student aid to fund low-quality, unproven, and uncountable training, and I'm sure that we can do better than that. Our country's employers are also have a responsibility. The unfortunate truth is that our nation's employers have divestment in our workforce. It's good that we have leaders like Ms. Tapani and other witnesses here today stepping up to the plate, and we thank you. More employers need to invest in their workforces. Republicans recently passed a tax bill for corporations, promising benefits would trickle down to workers, but even people who voted for it, the cuts have noted benefits are not going to workers on the scale that the bill proposed and promised to do. I know that some employers want to do the right thing and invest in their workforces, but on the whole, the tax cuts have not contributed to increased wages or helped workers get the training they need to land a high-paying job. We also need to remember that individuals with barriers to unemployment often need additional supports as they engage in quality training programs and education. I'm concerned that in this Congress, we're having discussions around cutting critical work supports such as SNAP and Medicaid and creating a new barrier to employment and training. And so as we look to develop the workforce of America, we must ensure that this workforce looks like America. Our strategy must include greater consideration of and outreach to historically underrepresented groups, women, people of color, and individuals with disabilities. One final note, if the committee is going to have a discussion around how to engage and encourage businesses to invest in their workforces, then we need to have the right people in the room. Education Secretary DeVos is promoting a new training model, and she was on the Hill yesterday speaking with members of Congress and business leaders. So the past 16 months that she's been in the Department of Education, she's not appeared before this committee, and so I would echo the request made by Ranking Member Scott to again call Secretary DeVos before the committee to have a conversation about her priorities and the goals for the Education Department. I'm a former educator. I taught for 40 years, and so education is something that I am seriously concerned about. Again, I want to thank all of you for testifying and sharing with us the good work that you all do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Adams, and again, like to thank each of you for being here. And I'd mentioned earlier during my questions that I think there's a lot of opportunity in this area. Specifically, I already talked about the economic opportunity. This is, if we cannot fill jobs that are available in businesses, it will have a strong economic impact, and we will continue to see jobs go offshore. And at the same time, I think, Mr. Costello, you mentioned this, and you said it very well. I've been amazed, having been in a situation for 25 years where we just simply could not. That was our number one issue in the business at all times. You could not find the individuals available to fill the positions, good-paying, family-sustaining jobs. And at the same time, you have people over here, you may have a high unemployment rate in specific areas of our community, or you have people not participating in the workforce at all. And we have a higher number of individuals not participating in the workforce than we had in a long, long time, particularly among males of working age. 1940, I think it was 88% of working age males were participating in the workforce. Today, it's down to 62%. So there's some disconnect that we haven't been able, there's a bridge that needs to be built, and I think we can do that, and it's specifically around the issues that we're talking about here. There was a group in my community, we've done a lot of work in the city that I have represented, Lancaster in Pennsylvania, as a state senator, and a group in my community who looked at some of the great things that were occurring from economic development projects, and we have a vibrant city now, but also saw that it really didn't have a lot of impact on people who live there in terms of helping to lift people out of poverty. And that group really took a hard look at what's going wrong or what can be done differently to help move people out of poverty, set a goal of reducing poverty in our community by half, I think by 2035 or something along that line, but identified the number one way to lift people out of poverty is by connecting them with a good-paying job. And so that's the other opportunity we have here. That number of males who are not participating in the workforce, a high percentage of them are either on disability or in a household with some other government assistance program. Some of these programs are absolutely necessary for people who need them, but in other cases it keeps people from connecting with the jobs that are available and from lifting them out of poverty. And so I think that's the other opportunity we have here. We can maintain, we can ensure that the dollars are available for these programs for the people who need them most by moving people out of the programs who can and connecting them with with great paying jobs. So there's tremendous opportunity in this area. I think you all have talked about programs that are working extraordinarily well in your areas. I've seen businesses start to engage in a way that they haven't before. We're going to need a lot more of that. We're going to need businesses to step up and understand that workforce development is an important part of their success, their future, and they need to continue to invest in it. But at the same time, I think we can provide the right environment for that to occur, and we can provide a strategy and help to encourage the kind of connections that we've seen here on apprenticeship programs with community colleges and workforce development organizations in our communities. So again, it was a great discussion. This is a discussion that will be ongoing, and we'll continue to look for ways from this subcommittee, I'm sure, and from the Ed and Workforce Committee here to continue to promote the kind of activities that all of you are engaged in every day. So thank you for being here. And without objection, there being no further business, the subcommittee now stands adjourned.